Good evening, namaste, and welcome back to India. I believe you've been in Paris for a while, but let me start by first of all welcoming our audience to the Savoy for this important plenary session. And I'm sure that everybody's enjoyed the morning ragas, including Bhairavi from ITC's Sangeet Research Academy. So I think this is the perfect setting to talk about history, which we'll come to in a moment. But I must, to begin with, acknowledge VOW, the organizers of this festival, and most of all, the inspiration behind it, my friend Dr. Sanjeev Chopra, who's also the director of Labasna. And welcome once again to all our officer trainees, as well as other younger friends, because I think VOW is actually about an intergenerational dialogue and bringing in multiple genres, languages, and traditions on a common platform. So, having said this, François, I must congratulate you on your new book, An Entirely New History of India. I'm going to say a few things about it in a moment. But first of all, I wanted to ask you, how was it like to be in Paris and in France at this difficult time in Europe? We've just had news of the Vienna shootings, and of course, earlier the beheadings at Nice and Paris. So, how are things over there, if I might ask?
So these are two different questions, actually. The first one is about COVID, of course. Um, COVID always looks worse in the other countries. Like when we went to France, some of our friends were scared. Oh, you're coming from India, India, the land of dirt and slums, and then when we came back to India, some of the friends here in India said, "Oh, you're coming from France, dangerous." So it's okay, actually. I mean, in Delhi, I move around. We had meetings today. In Paris, I moved around a lot, my wife and myself. She had meetings. I had meetings with my publishers. I have written a book on Ayurveda, which is getting published now. I have also given to another publisher a biography of Amritanandamai. So we are careful. We wash our hands. We wear masks. But we're not scared. Life must go on. So the French are in France, as in Delhi. Life is going on, and I think it's important that while taking all precautions, we must move on. The world cannot come to a standstill and everything be online. I mean, online means lacks the physical proximity, the contact, the human contact, which is so essential in our world today, which is already so digital. Now, the second thing about Islamic terrorism, we were actually in Nice the day where the three people were, ritually their throats cut. And of course, there was very heavy police presence. We took a flight from Nice to Paris after that. There was so much police. One thing about the French, that they don't scare so easily. So people have admired Macron for openly saying, this is Islamic terrorism and we need to fight it. And people have hated him and even want to kill him because he has said that. But being a Frenchman, I know the faults of the French, and we saw in France how they were on the cafe terraces, smoking, drinking, chatting without any mask, so they have a lot of faults, but it's a land also of freedom of expression, and the French do not understand how you can kill for a cartoon. Okay, people have been offended, Muslims have been offended, but how can, for instance, Mr. Matahe, who was the prime minister of a respected country, say, it's all right to behead someone like the teacher was beheaded in the suburbs of Paris for having shown, he has not even drawn the cartoons, he showed it to his students. Okay, in the Middle Ages, fine, but the French find that we're in the 21st century and this is absolutely unacceptable. So yeah, it was okay, it was fine, the French will survive.
Thank you, Francois. I'll directly get to your book now, which I must confess, very quickly read through, and I find it a wonderful read. It's It's almost breezy because it's not cluttered with with too much, data and research and too much of the kind of official history writing, historiography that we are used to. But it's a readable history for a lay person, but who's a intelligent and curious person. But let me take you to the very end of the book, which is of course about the future of India, and one of the passions that both you and I share is the life work of Sri Aurobindo and the mother, who wanted to bring down a new consciousness, and they were so interested in the future. So I'm glad that you wrote this chapter, and let's start with the future. And let me read the last paragraph, with your permission. We therefore not only require a
Please.
new history of India, but also need to change our perception of this very ancient civilization, which is a future great economic, political, military, nuclear, and spiritual power. For contrary to for contrary to China, India, in spite of so many bloody invasions and heavy handed European colonization, kept alive its spiritual tradition of tolerance, compassion, acceptance of the other, and the knowledge that God manifests himself or herself at different times using different names and different scriptures. This knowledge, which once dominated the world from Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the Celts or the Celts to Greece, is alive today in India, and alone it can save the world. So that's a very bold statement, but I know you a little bit, and you always make bold statements. You've never shied away from saying it the way it is. So before I come back to your book, I just wanted viewers to get, listeners to get some sense of you as a human being, your very, very fascinating career. And I can just start by telling them that you've been in India almost 50 years of your 70 years. So, what is it that drew you to India? You came as a young man of 19, and in a way, you never left. So, what was this fascination for India, François? And I know that you've married an Indian lady. I've met your wife as well, and you live in Auroville, the city of the future. So, what is it? What is this fascination for India?
Right, I came to India by accident or by fate, or however you choose to name it. I had a friend whose father was the last governor of Pondicherry. Pondicherry, as you know, was a French colony. Once upon a time, the French dominated India before the British came. But one of the French king, Louis XV, lost interest in India, and he recalled Duplex, who was like the Clive, he was a Clive of the French, and he was on the verge of, he had reached Bombay, and he was on the verge of taking the whole of India for the French. So anyway, the French have a few colonies left, and Pondicherry is the main one. And my best friend's father was the governor of Pondicherry before independence. And my friend told me there was a caravan of cars driving from Paris to Pondicherry to start a city called Auroville, based on Sri Aurobindo vision, with a lady called the mother, who was more or less at the helm of this new city. So I was very young, and I was unhappy. I had questions for which I didn't find any answers. So I thought, let me take this caravan and then drive to Pondicherry, and from there go to Southeast Asia, Japan, do a world tour, and become a man, experience the world, maybe find answers to my questions. So this is what I did. I didn't know India. I didn't know Sri Aurobindo. I didn't know the mother. I was not interested in spirituality, but I took this caravan and we drove through many countries. It was a very adventurous trip. I wrote a book in French about it. And we reached Delhi after 5 weeks of driving with second-hand cars and many accidents. And in Delhi, I spent the night in the Sri Aurobindo ashram. It was then a very small old house in the fields. You can't believe it today when you know what is called the mother school today in Sri Aurobindo Marg. But in those days, was a small house in fields, and there was a book of Sri Aurobindo which someone had given me, and it was in evening. I opened that book. I climbed on top of one of the vans. It was sunset, very peaceful. I opened the book and read a few lines, and I had a strong experience. Now I'm putting it in words, but I felt that I had come home, that there was an ancient knowledge in this country that would give answers to all my questions. And I also felt that I would stay all my life in this country and defend this country. You know, it came like an intuition, like a flash. So then I decided that very first night that I would stay here. We drove from Delhi to Pondicherry. In those days, it was not easy. The roads were small. And as I said, the cars broke down very often. So in a week, we reached Pondicherry. And I met the mother. She was a French lady. She was a great yogini. And she was already very old. But she looked into my eyes. And again, my world went topsy-turvy. And it reinforced my decision to stay and to live in India. So I became an ashramite and spent many years reading Sri Aurobindo, meditating. I worked in a garden. I was very young, but it was probably the most intense period of my life. And then the mother died. So when the guru dies, you become an orphan. I didn't know what to do. So I started doing some freelancing. I had done some journalism in France, done some photography, done some writing for a local paper in Paris. So I started freelancing, and I discovered India actually. In Pondicherry, you cannot know India really. Pondicherry, Goa, Srinagar, these are places where you can stay for all your life and not really know the real India. But when I started freelancing in the south, I discovered, what you just read, I discovered it in the people, in the rural people of India. My first feature was on Karari Payat, which is a very ancient, as you know, of course, Kerala martial art that went away with Buddhism, first to China, where it became, the Kung Fu, what is called the Shaolin boxing, and then went on to Japan, to Okinawa, and became mixed with some local martial art and became karate. So anyway, I met the masters of this. It was a long time ago. They were village people, and they were teaching after their jobs. In the evening they would teach freely as a seva, the young girls and the young boys of the village. And meeting these people, I was a white man, ignorant, with my cameras, but I felt in them that they accepted me as I was. I felt in them what I said at the end of the book, that in their genes, like we, the Christian, we say we have to be good, we should not steal, we should not kill, we should accept the others. But these people, they had it in their genes because generations of generations before them, had practiced this. So for the first time, I had, a real inkling of India, of what is the genius of India. Not in Delhi, not with the intellectuals, and the journalists, and so many people in Delhi, but in the rural people. That knowledge is in the with the rural people of here, with the simple people. So that changed my entire outlook. And when I became a political journalist and moved to Delhi, I never forgot that first inkling that Indians have this knowledge in their genes. It is not in their mind, it is in their heart. And this was a very important lesson for me. So this is how I started, discovering India.
Well, what a fascinating story that is. How did you commence your journalistic career? I know that you wrote for this very elite and, should I say, one of the best newspapers at that time in Europe, Journal de Genève, and then you switched to Figaro, isn't it? Can you tell us a little bit
Correct,
about
that's
your
correct.
journey?
Yeah, Sri Aurobindo said that, all life is yoga. So even politics is yoga. And as a journalist, I felt that what I was doing was interesting, but politics is life, politics is the world. So I wanted to become a political journalist. So when I started going to Delhi, I contacted what was then one of the best European newspapers, political paper, Le Journal de Genève, and I started writing for them and traveling all over South Asia, from Sri Lanka to Bangladesh to Pakistan to Nepal, and discovering what is called South Asia. I still feel that politics is that we need to transform politics. Mother spoke about the great asuras, the great lords of untruth, of adharma, and one of them is politics. Of course, there is money, and there's politics. So it's important that we transform politics. So I started writing for the Journal de Genève, but my second awakening was Kashmir, because I started covering Kashmir for the Journal de Genève and later for Le Figaro, and I spent a lot of time in Kashmir. This was between 89 and 2000, I would say. In those days, there were so many Western journalists in Delhi. There are many less now, but in those days, every major newspaper and television had their 1, 2, 3 correspondents in India. And the CNN was starting. Mark Tully, of course, was a Lord of the Rings because he was very respected, for BBC and spoke Hindi and very knowledgeable man. So we all moved from Delhi to Kashmir, and in those days there was curfew most of the time in Kashmir. There was only one hotel opened for a long time. It was called Aduz. It was on the bank of the Jhelum River, and most of the Western journalists would stay there, and from there take curfew passes from the army and move around either with the army or with the militants. Kashmir opened my eyes because for the first time I saw, and I don't want to speak negatively or offend anybody, but I saw that in the name of a religion, you could do an ethnic cleansing of innocent people. The Hindus of Kashmir then when I started going to Kashmir, even before 89, there were still many Hindus in the valley of Kashmir, because people are very ignorant about Kashmir. Even in India, that there is Ladakh, which has a Buddhist majority. Then there is the valley of Kashmir, where there was 1 million Hindus in 1900. At the beginning of the 20th century, there were still 1 million Hindus there. And then there is Jammu, where there's a dwindling majority of Hindus. Now, we would go, of course, to the valley of Kashmir and to Srinagar, and from there, we would travel all around Kashmir. Now, I saw that the Hindus, were very inoffensive, very harmless people, very good people who had been there for generation upon generation and did not convert to Islam like many of their brothers and sisters. They were first murdered. I saw some of the leaders whom I interviewed, like Dr. Tiku, he was a surgeon, like the director of Doordarshan. I saw them murdered, and then Benazir Bhutto, whom I interviewed twice before, on a Friday, she did a very famous speech mentioning as Kashmir. And so in the evening, all the mosques started saying, Hindus convert or die. And I was there, 350,000 Hindus in a few months left everything behind them, their houses, their ancestral properties, their fields, and became refugees in their own country. So for the first time, and this really opened my eyes. This is how I started studying Indian history. Because people live an entire life secondhand. They read newspaper, they hear what the teacher said, they hear what the respected leader said, and so, but they live secondhand. But firsthand, I saw in Kashmir, that in the name of God, which says that I'm the only one and all the others are false, an entire, brothers and sisters, are just chased out, and killed, because they would have been killed if they would have stayed. They would have been definitely killed. So they fled without firing a single shot. So I'm a Frenchman. As you said, I'm a bit my word. Fire a single shot in defense, shocked me also. I must say that it also shocked me, because after all, there were many men, and there were many men in their prime, but they all fled, and it broke my heart, actually. It really not only opened my eyes, it broke my heart. So I did an exhibition on the Kashmiri Pandits. One day, in Srinagar, there was a guy called Shabir Shah. I believe he's in jail now, in Tihar jail. He was a very popular guy with Western journalists. So Shabir Shah had been under house arrest, and the drivers, in Kashmir, our drivers were all Muslims, of course. They would inform us, and they would inform the militants. So they informed us that on that particular day, Shabir Shah would surface in the old mosque in the old Srinagar. And so everybody trooped there. Everybody went there. But I didn't go. I went to a small Hindu temple, Ganesh temple in Srinagar, which had been attacked the day before, and I met the pandits there. And I was very touched by the courage to stay behind, though they were protected by the BSF and the army. I was very touched by the courage. So I decided that day that I would do an exhibition on them. This is how my Indian history started. I did an exhibition of the Kashmiri Pandits, which I opened in Habitat Center, Delhi, with Shri Ravi Shankar and Mr. Advani. And then I started studying Aurangzeb, and I did an exhibition on Aurangzeb based on his firmans, because Aurangzeb was a very meticulous emperor, who wrote down everything that he did and had the emperor seal upon them. Then I started studying Maharana Pratap. I started studying, all the heroines of India. And so I started writing books also, but though I'm not a historian, I came to India by accident. I became a journalist by accident. I became a so-called historian by accident. But I felt that Indian history was not written as it happened. I mean, in my book, I think you've seen that. For instance, Alexander the Great, who was portrayed as victorious by most, not only Greek historians, but any historian, actually had a very tough time in India. He was wounded, had to retreat, and eventually died from this wound. He was also awed by, the yogis and the wisdom that existed in India, and the science also. So I corrected that. Ashoka, who's been taken by Mr. Nehru as a hero, of Indian history, because he converted to Buddhism after the terrible battle of Kalinga, actually didn't convert to Buddhism much before. It was for political reason. There was a struggle against the Jain and the Buddhists in those days, and Ashoka wanted to counterbalance the Jain influence. So like that, the entire Indian history, including, I must say, the independence movement, because today, of course, Mahatma Gandhi was a great soul, and he what he did for India is, extraordinary. But the independence movement was started much before by Sri Aurobindo and Tilak, and all those people who were hanged because they threw bombs on collectors or tried to kill the British soldiers. The famous Indian mutiny, which is portrayed in history books as the first war of independence, actually was a war to put back on the throne the last Mughal, and it was extremely cruel. So I don't call it a war of independence. I call it a mutiny to restore the Mughal throne. So like that, the entire Indian history needed to be rewritten, not by me, because it is there. If you research enough, you're a historian, if you search enough for documents, they are there. They are there for everybody, but nobody cares to look at them. Like Aurangzeb Firmans, they're all preserved in the Bikaner archives in Rajasthan and in Hyderabad in a museum. So you can get them, translate them. This is what we did with one of your professors, actually, Professor V.S. Bhatnagar, who was a part of your institute in Simla, wonderful professor, and another of my Professor K.S. Gupta of Udaipur, also who was part of your institute. So we are grateful to the institute that you're heading now.
Oh, that's good. I wanted to ask you one little question, because I remember you wrote another book called Rewriting Indian History some years ago. I think it was 2003 or 4. And I find that this book is a marked improvement. That seemed like a collection of columns or something. I'm not sure what. But in other words, you've been thinking about this for a long time, and you've come back to this point. And I want you to link it up with your other, very, very important work, which hasn't been given as much recognition as it should have been. Your museum that you started, as well as your documenting the history of the Hindu Holocaust. So, can you tell us a little more about that? Because most people, I don't know whether they've even heard of this important work of yours.
Right. So, as I said, I started the exhibition on the Kashmiri Pandits, which we opened in Habitat Center. Then I did another one on Aurangzeb.
I saw that.
That's a long story because
Yes.
I ran into trouble with that exhibition, but that's another story. Then I did an exhibition of the Bangladesh minorities because in Bangladesh, not only the Hindus were, in 1947 they were 35%, and today they are like 4 or 5% have been persecuted, but also the Ahmadi Muslims have been persecuted in Bangladesh, the Christians. So another exhibition on Bangladesh and Aurangzeb. Then I did. Yes. Then I did, I started doing 4, 5, 6 exhibitions. And once you inaugurate them, then, once the media thing is over, then what do you do with them? So I stored them. I rented a place in Pune and I stored them in Pune. So when I had so many exhibitions, one day Sri Sri Ravi Shankar was always very supportive of fact of our foundation, told us that, I have a piece of land in Pune near the airport, and I was planning to do a college there, but if you want, you can have it and put your exhibition there. So this is how the Shivaji Maharaj Museum of Indian History started in a very small scale because it's a Seva project. So I got a prize of journalism from Mr. Vajpayee in the Parliament Annex. It was called the Nakshikita Award of Excellence in Journalism. There was a check of 50,000 rupees. And with this, we started our foundation fact. And the museum started. So every time I get a donation, I do a small building. I put one exhibition. I have done now about 26 exhibitions now. At the moment, I'm doing a series of exhibitions on heroines of India, because in the West, people think that Indian women are only raped or beaten or burnt, but actually they were royal. I mean, even today they're royal for that matter. But they were such great queens. I mean, we did Halia Bai, who was an extraordinary. She was not even of royal blood, as you know. She was adopted, and father-in-law died, her husband died. She became a queen, a very enlightened queen, who built dharamsalas and temples, and had a battalion of Indian women. Extraordinary queen. Then now I'm doing Rani Ketu Chennamma. She's a queen from Karnataka, who also, by accident became a queen and fought the British, and died fighting. Then I'm doing Tarabai, of course. That is your professor, K.S. Gupta in Udaipur. I just got the paintings today. I will take to the museum tomorrow. There are 20 paintings already. And then I'm doing Jijabai, because Jijabai was of course, the mother of Shivaji Maharaj. And she gave, because of her, Shivaji Maharaj became the man that he became. So Shivaji Maharaj, of course, I discovered also Shivaji Maharaj. I'm a fan of Napoleon. I'm born, my parents' house was near Napoleon's tomb in Paris called Les Invalides. So I had heard about Shivaji Maharaj. I knew he was a great man. And when I went to Pune to teach, my wife and I are teachers of the art living techniques, pranayama techniques of Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. So I went to Pune to teach a course, and I thought there would be a great museum about Shivaji Maharaj in Pune. So I told my driver at the end of the course, take me to the main museum of Pune. He took me to a museum called the Kelka Museum, where there was not a single exhibit on Shivaji Maharaj. It's another story, the Congress divided in Maharashtra, the Brahmins, who are mostly the holders of the knowledge about Shivaji Maharaj, and the Dalits were often followers of Ambedkar and converted to Buddhism, but still love, because they're Marathis, still love Shivaji. So they're pitted against each other by the political people. So anyway, that's why there was no museum. So that day I thought I should do something. I mean, that's a bit arrogant, but I thought I should do something. So when I got this land from Sri Sri, I dedicated to the museum to Shivaji Maharaj. My first exhibition was on Shivaji Maharaj that I put in the museum. Mr. Modi was then the chief minister of Gujarat. He heard about me because our Aurangzeb exhibition ran into trouble in Chennai, so he knew about me. So he came to inaugurate it with Sri Ravi Shankar. Now we have 2 exhibitions on Shivaji Maharaj in the museum. And of course, we have one on Tipu Sultan, we have one on Aurangzeb, we have one on the Hindu Holocaust from the Hindu Kush till Mumbai 2011. We have one on the Goa Inquisition, but we also want to show the glory of this extraordinary country, which is India. So people like Maharana Pratap, was the only Rajput who actually fought the Mughals. People think that the Maharajas, I mean, in my country, France, they think, oh, Maharajas, such great people. But actually, the Maharajas collaborated first with the Mughals and then with the British. I mean, one man fought them was Maharana Pratap. And he's not known, actually. I mean, apart from the north, if you go in the south, nobody knows Maharana Pratap. But he's, on par with Napoleon. I mean, Shivaji Maharaj is on par with Napoleon, probably greater. But when I did my exhibition, I printed it in Pondicherry, and the people who printed it, good people, good friends, Hindus, they thought, Shivaji Maharaj there was an actor called Shivaji in the south, in Tamil Nadu. They thought, they didn't know about Shivaji Maharaj, So this is why also I'm doing that museum, is that Indian children need to be rooted in the greatness of the country and also the darkness, And like in France, we are taught, about the greatness of our warriors and Napoleon, our poets, our writers, our ancestors. So people grow up to be proud to be French. This is why, they can protest the way they do now when there are beheadings, because they're proud to be French. But in India, you're just producing clones, good for export, because they have no knowledge about Shivaji Maharaj, Maharana Pratap. They're told that they are nobodies. They're told that, they get 2-3 lines. So it shocks me, and this is why I write this book, this is why I do this museum, is that Indian youth, are proud to be Indians. And this is, I think, extremely important. Mr. Modi came and he's giving back some pride to this country, but otherwise it's a country of an inferiority complex where, people make an art of running down their own country. If you're an intellectual here, of course you're an exception, but if you're an intellectual here, people like Ramachandra Goa were brilliant people, or Arundhati Roy, who was a brilliant writer, they make an art of running down their own country. They're brilliant in, negativity. This is, a leftover of colonialism, that, everything from the West is great, everything from India is bad. So we need to change that. And I think your institute is doing its part in that. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now.
Oh, absolutely. I'll go to that after. I have just a couple more questions because it's been so fascinating. What I thought was extraordinary about your work, apart from your boldness and your fearlessness, is the way you integrate all this: the writing, the exhibitions, the museum, and the integrative also extends to spirituality. Now, we are both familiar with Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, and how clannish the followers of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother become. But you've written on Amritanandamayi, now you're associated with Sri Sri. Do you feel that people try to box you into a straitjacket and you always break free? I'm told that you were thrown out of the best Catholic schools in Europe. So, is there a rebellious streak in you which refuses to be contained in that straitjacket?
No, there is good rebellion and there's bad rebellion. I mean, I have also bad rebellion in me. I don't like discipline. I don't like, to be channeled. So this is not good rebellion. But there is a good rebellion, of course, is that not accepting injustice. The fact that something that revolts me injustice. And what I saw in Kashmir was pure injustice, and it revolted me. So yes, I'm rebellious in that sense. But my first guru is, as I said, my first guru is Mother India. When I came to Delhi as a youngster of 19, totally ignorant, absolutely ignorant, I felt in the body of India, because there was no guru, there was nothing. It was just the body of India. There's a presence in the earth of India, which I felt other times. I felt it in Pune. I felt it in Kashmir also. Once, there was curfew. It was night. We were in that famous hotel, Aduz Hotel, which is on the band. On the band that stopped the Jhelum River from overflowing during the monsoon. So there was curfew, but you could walk on the band, because it was dark and so you could hear the gunfire, you can hear the grenades, because in those days, every night, there was gunfire, grenades, attack on the army, attack on the BSF. And I was walking and I felt that, Kashmir needed to be preserved because of its spirituality, because millions of people have, gurus and avatars and sadhus, have meditated in Kashmir. Every guru, every saint, every sadhu, I don't know about now, but, till then, I had to go to Kashmir because Kashmir is a holy place, not only because of Kedarnath, because of the holy Himalayas, because of Lord Shiva. So that night, on the Jhelum River with the grenades and the gunfire, I felt that, that they had impregnated the soil of Kashmir, in spite of the revolt, in spite of the killings, in spite of the grenades and the gunfire I could hear. So when I first came to India, my first guru was Mother India. So it is true that, I think that every guru, there are so many great gurus, and I don't like the fact that the disciples think that their gurus is the only one, all the other gurus are false or lesser. This is the same thing that we find in Christianity and Islam, that, my God is the only true one, and if you don't believe in my God, I can either convert you with financial means like the Christians are doing now at the moment, in a tremendous, with tremendous success in South India, or I can kill you. Like the Muslims are doing now very regularly. So the same thing is true with Guru. It's human nature. It's not Muslim, not Hindu. It's everybody. I've seen. I'm very devoted to Sri Ravi Shankar because he's brought so much in our lives. Mother died. I'd read Sri Aurobindo. Then we met him, and he taught us pranayama, and he's been so supportive, of my effort for that museum, and he's given so much love, But these disciples, are the same. Only my guru, all the other gurus no good, And it's also true with the disciple of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. So in that way, I'm rebellious, but that's a good rebellion. The other rebellions might not be as good.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, before I say something about IIS, I still remember the time that we were together at the Brahmaputra Literature Festival, and I was chairing the panel, and it became so controversial that in the afternoon, I saw that they had assigned 2 commandos to guard you because one person on the panel had threatened that you see me outside, etc. So, but I admire your courage and you're controversial. You don't care about the
No, but
left
I
and
should
the
tell you the
right.
story. I should tell you the story. No, but I should tell you the story about that, because I was on a panel and there was a discussion.
No, I just wanted to say that you don't care about the left and the right, but you care about Mother India. That's what I wanted to say. But go ahead with the story.
All right. No, I was on a panel and there was a particular subject of discussion, and this guy was obviously, a staunch Marxist and, hater of Modi and everything, started going on a completely different subject, that in India there's no freedom, people are in jail, and he interrupted me and he was quite rude. So in the end, I told him, come outside, we'll just settle it, we'll just settle it like, like men, and so he said, you're in Assam here. He wasn't Assamese. You're in Assam here, be careful. So there was one of the organizers who was there, and they gave me police protection for the rest of the conference. I had police protection. But I must say I was shocked because this conference was, done by the BJP. Mr. Javadekar had come. We flew in the same plane, actually. And the BJP, the chief minister was a BJP guy. I was astonished during that conference how much pro-Chinese stance was there, among many of the speakers. I didn't know. I was shocked, actually, that anti-India, pro-Chinese stance among many of the speakers there. And that one was, it just happened to be there, and I just happened to be a Frenchman. I don't like bullshit, so, but I was really shocked. And of course, the BJP chief minister was absolutely oblivious about it. He came to inaugurate it with 25 cars as usual, and left, as soon as the inauguration was done, never came back, I mean, politicians have to have an ear on the ground, I mean, even Mr. Modi, I have so much respect for him, but how can you have an ear on the ground in Delhi, so far away from the reality of India, with so much rings of security and bureaucrats. I know he has intuition, he meditates, but politician needs to have an ear on the ground, and they don't have it in India. Maybe because India is so popular, there's so many people, but as a journalist, we have an ear on the ground. We should, at least. We should have an ear on the ground. But politicians in India don't have an ear on the ground, and this is one of their greatest failings. Sorry about that.
Yes, well, that's how you are. You speak plainly, and that's what makes it so refreshing to talk to you. Now, about our institute, you know that our second president, Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, he was instrumental in founding it. And the interesting part is we'd just come out of a war with Pakistan. It was 1965, and even the food situation wasn't that great. Lal Bahadur Shastri was the prime minister, and MC Chagla was the education minister. And Radhakrishnan felt that India should have a place where scholars could come with no strings attached and reflect on the deepest problems and challenges which affect humankind, not just any sect or any group of people or any particular ideology. And you remember the world was in a Cold War. So it's an extraordinary place. And of course, it's housed in this British colonial ex-viceregal lodge. But unfortunately, even here, we have the same politics, as we have everywhere in India. In India, we don't, I think, care for our institutions as if they belong to the nation and are the pride of the nation and should be preserved for the next generation. Often we treat institutions as, places to be despoiled by people for personal power or profit. So I feel a bit bad that we could do so much more if the politics had been a little less and people were dedicated, to the institution, as often people are abroad. I've lived abroad as you've lived in India. And I see that there's a lot that we have to do before we become the Jagat Guru and so forth, you see. And therefore, I think we are almost out of time. So I'm just going to ask you what your next project is. And then I'll come back to your book for a moment before we close. So what is it that you're planning to do next? Apart from the book on Ayurveda, which you just mentioned, what's your next project?
Yeah, so my book on Ayurveda, it's an encyclopedia actually, with a lot of drawings and a lot of photos and explanation about all the plants. It's a very comprehensive book. Probably one of the most. I mean, I had researchers. I'm not an expert on Ayurveda. Probably one of the most comprehensive in the West about what is Ayurveda, its history, how it is relevant today, and it's becoming back in fashion now. I think the fashion is going to come. We have a chapter on COVID also, so I hope that it's going to be well received in France. I have signed another encyclopedia on pranayama with the same publisher called Flammarion, which is one of the big, famous French publishers. I was planning to write a modern history of India, but the publisher, with a wise old man, said, "Why don't you write a book about Indira Gandhi, and around Indira Gandhi you can weave, a story about modern India and the Gandhis and the saga of the Gandhis, the tragic saga of the Gandhis." So I have signed that book too. The Indian ambassador in Paris wanted me to write a book on Kashmir because the French are very ignorant about Kashmir. So that may come also, and I would write a small book on Kashmir. Now, this is my writing part. I have finished of course, my book on Indian history has just come out, and this is what we're talking about today. And the museum now occupies a lot of my time. It's a difficult project because I have to raise the money. I have to, do the exhibitions, before going to Paris, we went to Udaipur, met the painters, met the historian. The paintings came yesterday to Delhi. Now they've gone by courier to Pune. So I'm going to Pune tomorrow, and the museum was closed for 5 months. So it's reopened now, but I have to see what are the damages, make a new building to house the new exhibitions on Rani Kittur Chennamma, Tarabai. We have a wonderful exhibition done by someone else on the science in the Vedas. So like that, slowly expand the museum. And then, of course, I'm involved in Auroville, though not as much as before, but Auroville remains in my heart. So I mostly look after the relationship with the central government, for Auroville, so about the visas and the land. And today we had some meetings also with some ministers. My wife and I are auto living teachers, so we teach courses. I have written the biography of Sri Ravi Shankar. Of course, he's going to release my book on Thursday, online, of course. Then what else? What else I do? Oh, I'm still a journalist, a bit of a journalist. I ran a magazine in French on India called La Revue de l'Inde, which is published by another publisher in Paris called L'Harmattan. So that is, I do 2-3 issues a year. It's a big, thick magazine, mostly intellectual about India. We did an issue recently on how women from the Indian subcontinent settled in the French-speaking world, and and blended, adapted, but kept some Indianness. So whether they were Muslims or Hindus or Christians from Gujarat, from Sri Lanka, so wonderful issue. I had someone to help me. I have a small team in Pondicherry, so I do a lot of things. I feel that the COVID, has a tendency to freeze people. So I decided after 2-3 months that I have maybe 4, 5, 6 years where I have the energy to travel everywhere, to do so many things, to fight, to have this French militant spirit. So I've decided that COVID or not, while taking all precaution, I'm going to travel again. So I went to Delhi already once, went to the Himalayas for my birthday. We go to Binsar, a place that we're very fond of in Uttarakhand, and then came back, went to Udaipur, Bangalore, went to Paris, came back now to Delhi, going to Pune, then back to Auroville, then again I'll come back to Delhi for some other work. So I'm doing a lot of things, and if God gives me the health and the enthusiasm, I will continue for as long as I can.
That's perfect. I hope you come to Shimla with one of your exhibitions. Let's see if we can make it
Surely.
happen. And if you're really, really busy, yeah, we should try to make that happen, and perhaps at least a webinar if you're very, very busy. But my last question to you for this evening, because we're completely out of time, is about COVID. And do you think it has the potential to change human consciousness?
Super question. Super question. Sri Aurobindo wrote a book called The Hour of God that you probably know about. And he said, broadly, there are times where the Spirit of the Lord moves upon men and nations. And in those times, you can make a progress in a few years that normally takes centuries. But woe to the nation or the people who, when the time comes, are ready but misuse this time. So I feel that the COVID, is a great grace of the Lord for change. I mean, there's going to be damage. There's going to be people who suffer. There are going to be bankruptcies. But there is a great change that's going to happen to the world. I mean, there are several layers to the COVID. One is the virus itself. Now it came from China. I'm not a friend of China. I think that China is a very dangerous and bitter enemy of India, much more than Pakistan, very ruthless. And again, China has shown how to move the pawns on the chessboard, during this whole summer. And I believe they have gained quite a lot of territory upon India, though it is not said in the media. But the virus came from China, whether it was propagated by accident, whether it came out of a laboratory. Nevertheless, it came from China. So in Sri Aurobindo's, vision, behind every event, there is an occult force. There are occult forces. So definitely this virus, this COVID, brings with it negative forces, paranoia, fear. There's a lot of fear in the world. People are so scared in the world. The fear is probably more little than the virus, because you catch a little cold in France and you say, oh, is that COVID? Am I going to die? Am I going to contaminate my whole family, my wife? So a suspicion of the other. Oh, the guy is coming from India, dangerous. So with the COVID comes what you call Adamic force, bad forces. That is definitely the second layer of the COVID. Now the third layer is that this COVID is supported by two different elements. One is the media, which hypes everything, sensationalizes everything, scares people, scares government. I believe that, whether it is Mr. Macron or Mr. Modi, they all fall prey to this media campaign of, the COVID is gaining. Most people who die from COVID, are over 80. I mean, sometimes you see it in the newspaper. so many people recover from COVID. We see prime ministers, we see Prince Charles, we see the British Prime Minister, we see footballers, who are tested positive for COVID. Within a week, 2 weeks, they're out. So the people who die are all people who may have other ailments. The cancer is a much more terrible disease. That you suffer so much. You die from cancer. Most people die from cancer. But cancer has gone to the background now. It's everything about COVID. So the media is spreading that fear, spreading that occult Adamic forces, and the allopathic doctors, on the other hand. The pharmaceutical companies were going to gain from making a vaccine, from selling to people for I don't know what price, vaccination. So this is a third layer. There are instruments of these Adamic forces, and these instruments are the media and the allopathic doctors and the who are against everything, against Ayurveda, against homeopathy, they're against everything except allopathy. They're against that hydrochloroquine, which my wife and I take as a preventive thing, because it's been proved that it helps to prevent COVID, it helps to cure COVID. They're against it. So this is the third element. The fourth element is, in spite of it, there is a big chance going to happen. This is the breath of the Lord. This is the hour of God. In my opinion, I may be wrong, but the COVID is, I think, ultimately positive for humanity. It's a great change which humanity needs. Lots of things are going to transform. Lots of things are going to disappear, jobs, sports, But I think for the better. I think for the better. In spite of the Chinese, in spite of the media, in spite of the allopathic doctors, we're all puppets in the hands of God.
Thank you so much, François. It was such a delight to have this hour's tete-a-tete with you, and I hope to see you in Shimla one of these days. Thank you so much.
Surely, surely.